What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. We officially made it. It is NFL Sunday, week 1. More importantly, it is Packers game day, Packers Saints. I cannot wait for it to kick off. Thankfully, we have an amazing slate of noon games that I'm going to be just glued to NFL Red Zone. To start the day, of course, Packers kickoff is 3:25 in Jacksonville. You know that already. This is as good as it gets. There's nothing better than week 1, a full slate of NFL action, and we are going to be, wall to wall from, if you're Packers time, noon until about 10:30, 11 p.m. with football, and it just doesn't get any better than this. So there's only one topic to discuss today, right? This is a Packers Saints preview show. Let's dig in. Let's dive into all of the things that I'm going to be keeping an extra close eye on that I think is ultimately going to, really decide this game. Because as much as we've had this offseason of Aaron Rodgers trading for Randall Cobb, new draft class, new defensive coordinator, all of it, now is time to put up or shut up. Yes, it's the last dance. Yes, they're all in, but that journey truly begins today against the Saints in Jacksonville. So let's start off and kind of go over some of the X's and O's that I'm going to be keeping an extra eye on. And it starts really with the Saints line of scrimmage, or at least offensively when the Saints have the ball, their line of scrimmage, because I think this has the opportunity to be one of those matchups that really favors the Saints. I don't think there's a ton of matchups in this game that favor the Saints, but I think this is definitely one of them, especially if Zadarius Smith is unable to play. That Saints offensive line is legit. When you go to Ron Armstead, to Andrews Pete, to Eric McCoy, to Cesar Ruiz, to Ryan Ramczyk, that is 1 through 5 as good as it gets. Now, I still think Cesar Ruiz and Andrews Pete may have, maybe the potential weak points. I think Kenny Clark is really going to be one that needs to get some pressure. I think Kingsley Keke is another one to kind of keep an eye out for. But make no mistake about it, this is one area where the Saints, I think, have an advantage. Now, if Z plays, or if Green Bay gets good play out of Rashawn Gary and, of course, Kenny Clark and Preston Smith, then maybe that mitigates that a bit. But the very first thing you always want to watch, if you're taking your eye off the ball, is who's controlling the line of scrimmage. You want to know why the Packers lost to the 49ers in the NFC Championship 2 seasons ago? Go back and watch that game. San Francisco dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball for 4 quarters. You want to know why the Packers lost to the Buccaneers in the NFC Championship game? Mostly, there's a couple of reasons, but mostly because Tampa Bay dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball for the vast majority of that football game. It starts there, and I know it's so much more fun to talk about the Devontae Adams and, Jameis Winston starting at quarterback, Aaron Rodgers returning, and all of those skill position players, but so often it comes down to the nitty-gritty of the offensive line and who's winning those matchups in the trenches. And that Saints offensive line is absolutely a strength for that team. And again, one of the very few matchups that I think the Saints have a true advantage in. So the first thing to look for is if Green Bay is winning that matchup, to me, barring a crazy amount of turnovers or awful red zone production, just like, your usual things that can completely tank a game, outside of that, I love the matchups for this Packers. So if Green Bay does well against the Saints offensive line and can start winning or at least holding their own in that line of scrimmage battle, to me, that is a huge opportunity for the Packers and a really good sign for them in this game. On the flip side, if we see that the Saints offensive line is pushing around Kenny Clark, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, then I think you have cause for concern. That's one area where the Saints could really take advantage. And I think with Green Bay, and we're going to get to this more in just a minute, with Green Bay probably needing to substitute a little bit more because of the heat and humidity. If Z's not playing, now all of a sudden you've got Rashawn Gary, you've got Preston Smith, the depth behind those edge rushers, whether it be a Chauncey Rivers or a Garvin, like those guys probably aren't ready to go against a Ryan Ramczyk and a Teron Armstead yet. So those are, again, huge opportunities for the Saints on the interior. Tyler Lancaster, questionable for this game. That could, hurt their depth. You could be looking at 2 rookies in TJ Slayton and Jack Heflin that could be getting playing time, again, against that strong interior Saints offensive line. We'll see what Dean Lowry can accomplish. We'll see, of course, Kenny Clark, there's obviously a level of expectation that he's certainly going to play well no matter who it's against. But I think there's still questions to be asked. Kingsley Keke, another one. So we'll see what this Packers defensive front is capable of. But potentially Sands, Tyler Lancaster, and Zadarius Smith, the depth in the rotations get a little bit lighter there. And again, that it has to be 1A that you're keeping an eye on as you start kicking off this game for Packers Saints. Number 2 is on the other side. Again, comes down to the line of scrimmage, right? I think Green Bay in their offensive line is going to hold up mostly well against the Saints defensive front. I do think Marcus Davenport, if he can get matched up, on their left side, on the Packers right side against Billy Turner, I do think there's some opportunities there. We'll see how Elton Jenkins can hold up against Davenport, but I think that's one to keep an eye on. But then they're going to want to get Cameron Jordan testing out what we assume to be Royce Newman as the starting right guard, as well as Josh Myers at center. Welcome to the NFL, guys. You're going to have to go against one of the premier interior pass rushers in Cameron Jordan, and that's going to be another matchup where if Cameron Jordan is just a nightmare inside and he's getting immediate pressure on the interior, and it's forcing the Packers to move away from the running game, and it's forcing them to get out of their long passing game because they can't get to a 5 or 7 step drop, that of course changes things drastically. So those line of scrimmage is always worth watching early in the game, but I think even a little bit more so as this game kicks off because, again, of that strength of the Saints offensive line, as well as the just kind of, the newness and the rookies along the Packers offensive line. And then one of the potential real weaknesses in this game for either team, of course, is the Saints cornerback group. And the big news from Saturday is that Marshawn Lattimore was downgraded to questionable in this game. And that doesn't mean he's not going to play. He very well could still play. That could be something where they just needed to make sure he's on the injury report so they don't get fined, things like that. Easily could be the case. However, if this is something worse and he does not play, the Saints could be going into this game without Marshawn Lattimore, without Bradley Roby because he's suspended, without Crawley, their other likely top 3 corner in this game. They could be looking at Desmond Trufant, who just got to the team, Paulson Adebo, who basically didn't play a season ago and is a complete, in college and is a rookie playing in his first NFL game, Jordan Miller, who they just signed off the practice squad. Those would be their 3 corners. They don't have anyone outside of that. Now, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson plays a ton in the slot, so you can expect him to be their nickel corner. So basically, it's like having another corner. So they do have some flexibility there. PJ Williams is another player who's played some corner for them, but on the outside, it could literally be Trufant and Adebo, and if something happens to either of those guys, Jordan Miller comes in. So that could be a massive weakness. Now, if Lattimore's there and he's healthy and he's himself and he can match up against Davante Adams as much as anyone can match up against Davante Adams, that's a game changer, right? So that's going to be one of those things that's announced about an hour and a half prior to the game, but keep your ears open to see exactly what happens there, because Marshawn Lattimore's absence takes a already really short Saints cornerback group and makes it that much shorter. And I don't mean physically shorter, but just the depth of that group. So man, that would be a massive, massive loss for the Saints. So either way, even if Lattimore's in, I still think you can go after, whether it's Trufant, Adebo, Jordan Miller, etc. If those guys are in the game, I think you're attacking them in any capacity that you can. But if all of a sudden there is no Lattimore, man, that changes everything for the Saints defense. Next up, I'm looking at Jameis Winston. It is shocking to me. I posted on Twitter a couple days ago. I said this line smells fishy to me. I think it's -3.5 for the Packers right now. To me, this is the Packers won in New Orleans by 7 a season ago. I think this Packers team is very comparable to that Packers team. Packers didn't have Davante Adams in that game. Now they don't have David Bakhtiari and potentially Zadarius Smith this game. The Saints had Drew Brees a season ago, but this is now a neutral site. I expect there to be more Packer fans, or at least similar Packer fans to Saint fans. To me, it's going to be more of a neutral site. I know that there's been some struggles in Florida and things like that, but man, to me, this is a Packers team, especially if Lattimore's out or there's other injuries. This is the Packers team that should win this game. And, I don't really care at the end of the day, if it's by 1 or by 20, a win's a win, right? But to me, -3.5 seems a little bit fishy, which always scares me because I like the Packers by 6 or 7 in this game. Not maybe enough to put my money where my mouth is, but the interesting thing and why I wanted to discuss this is because of all the Saints fans in my mentions, they're all convinced that Jameis Winston is going to be much better than Drew Brees was a season ago. Now, to be fair, end of season Drew Brees last year was not good. It was time for him to hang it up. I get some of those things, but I think they forget just how, how much of a game manager, and I don't mean that always gets such a negative connotation, but like how much he can manage the game and keep everything going in a positive direction, not make major mistakes. And I think they have a sour taste in their mouth from how Brees finished the season. Brees had a great game against the Packers, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, almost 300 yards passing. Like, he had a really great game against the Packers. A lot of that was Alvin Kamara after the catch, but either way, I don't expect Jameis to play better than what Brees did a season ago, but either way, Jameis Winston, obviously a huge player to keep an eye on, and then always, want to see how they use Taysom Hill. Of course, he had the big turnover a season ago, which led to the Packers' victory. He's probably going to want to atone for that a little bit, but we will see what happens at that quarterback position. And again, a lot of Saints fans convinced Winston's going to be better than Brees. I am not so sure. Maybe, again, end of year Brees last year, I get it. Maybe he is, but we'll see how that plays out. And I still think Winston has some issues that he needs to work out overall. I don't think you just all of a sudden get better, although we've seen it and time to time again from like a Ryan Tannehill and things like that. So we'll see what happens there. Next up, Saints wide receivers. So we already know they don't have Michael Thomas. We already know they don't have Traquan Smith. So where does the production come from? Marquez Callaway is a fun wide receiver, but then it's Deontay Harris, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Chris Hogan. They still got Ty Montgomery, who may play some running back / wide receiver. We'll see. That's not exactly a top tier wide receiver group. This is a game where I want to see Kevin King, Chandon Sullivan play better. They're not going against the Mike Evans, the Chris Godwin, the Antonio Brown. Like, they're not going against that group. This is Marquez Callaway, Deontay Harris, Lil Jordan Humphrey, and Chris Hogan. This is a matchup that Green Bay's corners need to be better at. So that's another thing that I'm going to be watching here. But more importantly, if in fact Green Bay's corners are able to at least hold down that wide receiver group a little bit, no matter what, I'm watching for the other players on this team for the Saints offensively. Adam Troutman, they are very high on. They have great expectations for him. He was, I believe, a 3rd-round pick a season ago. We're going to see if he's able to ascend up as one of their top tight ends. Also, keep an eye out for a real X factor in this game, Juwan Johnson. We'll see what role he has, but he was a breakout player for them in camp and in preseason. He is a wide receiver, easy for me to say, turned tight end. They used him as a wide receiver a season ago as an undrafted free agent, stuck on the roster, moved him to tight end, and we've obviously seen some success with players that have done that in the past. Johnson has some unique traits to be able to pull that off, so keep an eye out for him in a receiving role for the Saints team, especially if they start using some double tight ends. And then, of course, Alvin Kamara has to be the focus of this Packers defense. Next up, of course, is that heat and humidity, and I alluded to it earlier, but I think Green Bay, with not having a ton of these guys playing the preseason, with a very hot, humid environment on the road, even though it's a neutral type setting, I think this is going to be a game where Green Bay has to rotate players in. Now, I think offensively that's to their advantage, right? They go at least 5 deep at wide receiver. They go at least 4 deep at tight end, in my opinion. They go at least 3 deep at running back. I think a lot of that is going to give them a lot of advantages on the offensive side of the ball. And I don't think it's entirely the same as A.J. Dillon maybe running in the 4th quarter in like Lambeau Field in like 20, 15, 10, negative 10 degree weather. But at the same token, if Aaron Jones is getting a majority of the carries throughout the course of the day, and then all of a sudden it's 4th quarter and those linebackers and defensive linemen are dog tired, and now A.J. Dillon comes in with fresh legs to kind of close things out, hopefully, like that still cannot be a fun task to have to deal with. So I think Green Bay has some advantages there offensively. Defensively, we already talked about the lack of depth at the edge rusher position, especially if Z doesn't play. The interior of the defensive line potentially, and again, especially if Lancaster doesn't play. So I want to see how those rotations work and if Green Bay can keep players fresh enough to be able to kind of mitigate some of the, I guess, concerns over that heat and humidity. One other thing that I want to look at is Aldrick Rojas. And you might be like, what? Like Will Lutz, their kicker, who's a very good kicker, is on IR. So in a game that, could theoretically come down to field goals, extra points, things like that, you've got Mason Crosby on your side. You've got Aldrick Rojas on the other for the Saints, who called up from the practice squad. So those are little things that could be a huge factor in a game that, at least according to Vegas, is about a 3.5 point game one way, or at least an advantage of the Packers. But, that could be a major issue for the Saints if they don't have their usual really consistent kicking from Will Lutz and have to rely on Aldrick Rojas. So So what I'm looking for Green Bay, pressure on Jameis Winston. How do they game plan for Alvin Kamara? Rotations and heavy subs to keep everyone as fresh as possible. Really establish the run early and often. I do think that is a recipe for success that can set up play action, that can set up their receivers, maybe some jet sweeps and motions, and then maybe even allow you to close the game out with A.J. Dillon against a very tired defense, especially if, again, you can keep those guys fresh throughout the course of the game. Cannot wait for this game. My prediction, I'm going to go with Packers by 6, 30-24. Packers over the Saints in Jacksonville. Packers move to 1-0, bringing it back to Lambeau Field for the home opener against Detroit on Monday Night Football. Guys, enjoy the noon slate of games. Enjoy this Packers game. This is as good as it gets. I cannot wait for kickoff. That's all I got today. I probably could have just started and ended it with enjoy the day, because that's all we probably need today. But just enjoy it. It should be a great day of football. I'll be right back here tomorrow covering hopefully what is a Packers victory. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, and especially on opening day, go Pack Go.